Before I even start this list ranking the bosses in RE9 Requiem from the easiest to the very hardest to beat, I have to say that this order is based on both my initial first playthrough and my multiple runs on Insanity difficulty. Some of these I debated if they should even be on the list in the first place, since I'm not exactly sure if they're truly considered bosses or even sub-bosses, but screw it, let's just include them and get started. Kicking off the list as the easiest boss in the game is Emily. I know she's actually the hardest fight emotionally, but considering you can't even die in this encounter in the first place, I think it's safe to say that she deserves a spot at the very bottom of the rankings. Next at number 13 is the Zombie Chef. Again, is he a boss? Maybe. Is he considered a sub-boss or optional boss? Possibly. Anyways, playing as Grace early on means you don't really want to go face to face with the chef since he can kill her quite fast, especially on Insanity difficulty. However, once you get her hemolytic injector, you can actually take him out quite easily. As for Leon, well, his arsenal and ability to parry will make quick work of him. Chunk, the one that stalks Grace, is similar to the chef, except he can close his distance much quicker than you think, and it will take far more injectors to completely kill him off. If you don't have enough injectors, then well, you're better off running away. However, the angry to noise zombie can actually one-shot both Chunk and the chef, just so long as you manipulate him with an empty bottle. At number 11 is Victor and the Garmars. I don't know if I'm saying that right. During a motorcycle chase, the main things you gotta focus on is reloading at the right times and actually hitting your shots. The Garmars can apply some heavy damage on the harder difficulties, and you'll need to worry about Victor shooting you with an RPG. Other than that, it's pretty simple and straightforward, with the showdown versus Victor being quite easy to survive, just so long as you shoot back at him. Similar to the past 4 entries on the list, where I'm not exactly sure if they're true boss fights or not, we got the Raccoon City Chainsaw Zombie at number 10. This guy wielding a flaming chainsaw can tank quite a bit of damage, so pairing that up with being surrounded by fire, then there's always a chance that you'll screw up and get sliced in half. Overall, I find this fight more difficult than the previous ones, especially on Insanity difficulty. Chunk is back again on the list, except it's the other brother who fights Leon in the attic. Battling with him is quite fun with shotgun blasts to the face and jumping hatchet strikes. As long as you don't get too close when he's rushing around and lure him into areas where he can't grab you right away, then this boss encounter will go rather smoothly. The girl, especially the first time you play against her, is a pretty tense boss fight since it heavily revolves around knowing where to go and when to use a Requiem or the lights to give you some breathing room while you go for the switches. On Insanity difficulty, you'll need to shoot her at least twice to stop her in her tracks, and well, getting grabbed from over the panel, especially on the first run, happens to the best of us. That being said, once you know where to go, this fight really isn't much of a concern. Coming in at number 7 is Plant 43. The build-up, as you get close to the boss, is quite well done. As for the fight itself, it's simple to manage. Just dodge his attacks by shifting between left and right, or by parrying them. Once he exposes his face, then hit him where it hurts right in his weak spot. If you got a good rhythm going, then this fight is quite easy. However, it is possible to take some heavy damage, especially if you get a little disoriented. When it comes to Whistleborn, you'll fight him twice, once in the church and then once in the Raccoon City ruins, with the latter being the easier of the two fights. The reason for this is because you simply have far more room to work with. As for taking him down, you'll have 3 options here. The first, don't fight him at all in this section and use some smart evasion and dodging to get the battery and move on, though this is actually harder than it sounds. Another way is to avoid shooting him in the pustules/blisters to avoid getting swarmed by more enemies, especially the blister heads. Instead, you'll just keep applying damage to his head until he finally goes down. The last and more obvious way is to damage his pustules with gunshots and melee hits whenever he's staggered while luring him into areas where he won't be able to bring a whole crew with him. If this is done correctly, then the fight is quite easy. If it's done wrong, well then all hell's gonna break loose. At number 5 is the first Blisterborn encounter, in which you'll have to fight him in a far more tighter area. If you do the War of Attrition method by shooting his head only, then the battle will last longer and cost more ammo, but you'll at least avoid things getting too crazy. The other strategy I usually do is to simply light the fuse and let all hell break loose by using explosive canisters, weapon throwing, and parrying to take down the pustules and enemies in the room. Either way, this boss showdown can go quickly out of hand, so plan accordingly. Crashing through at number 4 is my favorite stalker in Mr. X. If your parrying is on point, then this boss can be easy to manage. The cars, however, have some RNG, and since they're being thrown left and right, you can take damage when you least expect it, either by him throwing them at you and the physics going all wonky, or by them being pushed into you while he's doing his charge attack. Overall, it's a fun fight that isn't too difficult as long as you control the pace. Next up is the Commander, aka Hunk, though I suppose some people think it's not Hunk. Anyways, this fight is one that you can easily brute force your way through on the lower difficulties, since his movements are much slower and less damaging. On Insanity, however, you're gonna need to have your reactions and memorization of his patterns dialed in so that you don't get murdered by the Grim Reaper. At number 2 is a Shelob-inspired boss battle versus the Titan Spider. This fight demands that you keep moving and avoid letting the spider get too close to you, since it can easily obliterate your HP in a head-on fight. The explosive canisters are what you're gonna need to expose its weak spot and attack whenever it turns its back to you to launch the baby spiders. Playing around corners and parrying will keep you alive throughout this battle, but it can still be pretty tough, especially if you're not playing it properly. Finally, at number 1, as you may have already figured out, is the battle versus Victor Gideon, in which I decided to include both phases. The first phase is where Victor can be a true pain in the ass, since he has a variety of different attacks and they all have an annoying amount of range. This makes parrying and keeping your hatchet sharp pretty damn important. Once you pack on enough damage, he'll even start pulling out a rocket launcher, in which you can then either parry the rocket back at him, or damage him enough so that he drops it on the ground, in which you can then use against him. Once he goes down, you can then begin the second phase. This phase is more straightforward than the first, since it's very similar to the Plant 43 encounter. At the end of the day, Victor's phase 1 is what really makes him have the spot as the hardest in the game, but it, just like any other fights in the game, shouldn't really cause you to rage quit. But that's my list ranking the bosses in Resident Evil 9 Requiem from the easiest to the very hardest. I have a feeling that your list might be a little different from mine, so let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching!